All right, so good evening, everyone. This is Carolyn Operon speaking. For those of you that can't see me, I am the current chair of the executive committee of the Missouri Sierra Club Osage group specifically. And this, for any of you who aren't used to joining us, this is our meeting that we have every other month just to discuss what activities we have going on. And then also we generally have an educational speaker. And so tonight, our agenda will be that I'll just make a few announcements and share some things that are going on. And then we're delighted to have with us Maria Doerr, who is Christine Doerr's daughter. Christine is a member of our Osage Group Executive Committee. And Maria has some experience that with Sierra Club as a youth organizer. And so she's going to talk to us about it. Her experiences. So let me first make the announcements. I do want to mention to everyone that the call is being recorded. For those of you who may not have audio, you are welcome to type into the chat room, and we'll try and keep an eye on that. So in case there's questions or comments or anybody's just shy. Okay, so let me flip back to my note page here. So I do want to mention, in case anyone hasn't voted yet, that you can hang up and go vote right now because the polls are open till 7 and this meeting is being recorded. So hopefully everybody took care of that already though. In other news, we had originally asked everyone to save the date of August 22nd to have a Missouri Political Action Committee fundraiser. Sierra Club, National Sierra Club has asked us still to cancel all in-person events through the end of August. And I fear with the way the numbers are going for the pandemic that that extension might be, or that guidance will be extended, but we don't know that yet. But anyway, we're gonna switch that fundraiser to some type of online activity. And so if anyone wants to help plan that, just let me know here via audio, or you can type it in the chat, or you can get with me afterwards. Everybody can always reach us, me or the executive committee at sc.osage.group@gmail.com, and I'm typing that into the chat just so everyone has it. So, so we will be doing some type of fundraiser. It's really important that we have Political Action Committee funds, because although we have probably about 12,000 members in the state of Missouri now, that's people who actually have paid their dues, we have over 100,000 environmentally leaning people in our database. And in order for us to contact those people about our endorsements in the election, we have to have Political Action Committee money, not just our standard money that we use for our everyday activities. So that's why we are going to do a fundraiser. You may see something coming out from the Missouri chapter as well. So it's all one pack. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention is that with people voting, you know, with mail-in voting, voting is going to be happening earlier, and absentee voting. So people don't have to wait until November to vote. So we're going to need to get our endorsements done sooner. So anyone who would like to help make those endorsement decisions will be starting that endorsement cycle next week following the results of this primary, and hope to get those wrapped up within only a couple of weeks so we can get that information out early to people before they start their mail-in and absentee voting. So anyone who would like to participate in the political committee, please let me know through chat or email. And it isn't going to be a lot of work. The chapter staff has already taken on the duties of contacting the candidates and sending the questionnaires. So the main thing that we have to do is have a political committee that reviews the questionnaires, maybe also looks at the websites, and make sure that we're voting for, you know, good people. And that, so the political committee makes a recommendation to the executive committee, and then the executive committee makes a decision, and then anything that the executive committee approves has to go to a third level, which is in this case most likely the chapter level political committee. The Sierra Club takes our endorsements very seriously, so they have to go through 3 rounds of approval with a 2/3 majority on each vote. So, so anyway, I could use a few more people on the political committee just to participate in a couple meetings online for the, or via phone for the next couple of weeks.
Hey, Carolyn?
Yes. Question, go ahead. I think you put yourself on mute.
Your email didn't show up on chat.
It didn't. Oh, it went into the waiting room for some crazy reason. Everyone in meeting. There we go. Thank you. I don't know how it got set to talking to the people in the waiting room, but let me try that again. osage.group@gmail.com. Okay, another announcement is that Sierra Club is targeting battleground states in the November election to try and specifically speak to climate concerned voters. And so right now they've picked four states, which I can't tell you off the top of my head other than I know I'm helping with Florida. And there's multiple ways you can help. You can write letters. You can get on the texting team, or you can get on the calling team. And if you write letters, which might be easiest for some of us, you provide your own envelopes and stamps, but the club provides you these printed templates that have the name and address on them, and it's kind of a form, and you just fill in a section where you can write your own personal comments about why they should vote and to encourage them to vote to take action on climate change. So it's really easy. You get batches of 10 at a time, so it's not overwhelming. So I would encourage people to consider that as a way that we can help during this time of social distancing. And as I said, you can choose letter writing, texting, or calling. The letters that we write now will be held into a certain date before they're mailed. I'm going to type another, I'm going to type a address into the chat window. This activity is being run from a website called sierraclubindependentaction.org, just to really make the point that it's not being coordinated with any particular candidate. sierraclubindependentaction.org. You can visit there and get all the information on this battleground initiative to get a person in office who will take action on climate change. And they're initially they were focused just on the presidential election, but now they've expanded it and they're working on some other down ballot races. So hope you'll consider getting involved in that. Okay, then the next thing I wanted to mention is, given that we're doing virtual meetings right now, the chapter, Missouri chapter statewide, is hosting some online meetings as well. And that's not something they've done in the past, but this new situation has presented us a new opportunity. And so they have 2 coming up. One is on August 27th. It's going to be, the subject is going to be the program about mayors for clean energy. And I'm happy to say that the Columbia mayor is a participant in that program. And the next one is on September 24th. And that one is going to be about the election and what candidates and ballot issues we've endorsed. And so both of those will start at 6:30, and you can get information about them on the sierraclub.org/Missouri website. So they will, be Zoom meetings like this one. I just wanted to open it up and see if anybody has any announcements that they want to make, something I might have forgotten, or another environmentally or social justice related activity that they know about. So. Alice, you're on mute. Alice, if you want to talk, you're on mute.
Okay. Next Monday in Pettis County, since there's no Boone County Fair, they're having an opening of the Pettis County Democratic Party headquarters, and Elad Gross will be there, Lindsay Simmons, a couple of other, Nicole Galloway will be there. So I'm planning on driving down in my little Prius. If anyone wants to go, we could wear masks, but that's a lot of progressive candidates that would be there. So that's next Monday at 6:30 in Sedalia, the 10th.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Alice. Appreciate the announcement. I will just make the statement that Sierra Club is nonpartisan, but I do know that we're considering endorsing a couple of those people that Alice just mentioned, so that are in the works, the endorsement process. So, okay, well, that's all the announcements I have. So I'm going to introduce Maria so we can get on to our main event, which I'm definitely looking forward to. So Maria Doerr, who's in the meeting with us, is our speaker tonight. And Maria grew up in Colombia, and she's currently 24 years old. And I only mention that because in this particular case, we're talking about youth voices in the environmental movement. Maria currently works as a strategy consultant, and she provides support to some of the nation's largest philanthropies and nonprofits to help them develop long-term effective planning in the environment and educational fields. Some of her previous work has focused on centering frontline community voices and experiences. This is something that, you know, we definitely all could use more knowledge about how to do. And she's worked in watershed conservation in Mexico, solar microgrid deployment in rural Nicaragua, and international climate policy at the UN meetings of COP21 and COP24, which, if you're not familiar with those terms, are the international climate action negotiations. So Maria graduated from Stanford University with a BS in Environmental Systems Engineering in 2017. And if you want to learn more or possibly connect with her after this, you can reach her at mariadoerr.com. So with that, Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see some of you and to know the others are on the call. I've had the pleasure of learning about what the local chapter is doing through my mother and through the different activities I got to participate in earlier while I was living in Missouri. And today I'm excited to talk with you a little bit about youth engagement and activism. I attended Sprog in 2013 and was so grateful for the support that I received from the Sierra Club to go to that training. And I want to talk a little bit about the lessons that I learned there and have continued to learn since then, and how I've applied them in my work, and some opportunities to think about how youth voice and community voice can be centered in environmental movements. And so to start off, I'm going to share screens. I have a little PowerPoint that I will use while I'm chatting. So let me pull that up. Great. It is loading. But I think, so really to start off, what I'd love to do is just take one moment to go around, and as you are willing and able, I'd like to know who's on this call, so we can have a conversation. There'll be parts of this conversation which I would love your input on to create dialogue and to create some interaction. And so if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go around very quickly, maybe 30 seconds max. I'd love to know your name, someone who made you feel heard when you were a teenager or you were in your mid-20s, an environmental topic you care about. That can be as specific or as broad as climate or Smith Creek, as you want it to be. But would just love a quick reflection of the interests and the folks that are in the room. So I will stop talking, and I'd like to ask each of you to select the next person to go. So I'm going to select Christine to go first, and then Christine, you select the next person to go. So I'll start. My name is Maria Doerr. Someone who made me feel heard, my teacher, Mrs. Dickinson, in 5th grade. Environmental topic I care about is climate justice. Okay, Christine.
My name is Christine Doerr, and I think it was my 7th grade teacher, Sister Agnes, that made me feel heard. And an environmental topic I care about is soil conservation.
And now you can select the next person.
Oh, and
Oh, she muted herself.
Donna Sue.
Hi. Yeah, okay. I'm Donna. Did you say Donna Sue? Sorry. I'm Donna Kessel, and maybe my high school social studies teacher. I'm sorry, I'm getting the feedback. And I think overuse of stuff. Too much buying.
Great, and so let's select someone new. How about Alice Turner?
So I can't think of an individual, but in college we had something called Sisterhood is Powerful. And so I think that was something that made me feel heard. What was the second part that we were supposed to do? Say, an issue that concerned us? A topic. Well, in the 70s, you couldn't put your foot in a body of water. It was considered dangerous. So I went on in the 70s to work for Clean Water Action in DC, and that's always been a very important issue for me. Water, clean water.
Thanks, Alice. Would you like to choose the next person?
Oh, okay. How about Carolyn?
Okay, my name is Carolyn Ombron, and when I was in high school, I can't remember the names of a specific person, but I know we were kind of an activist group in high school, and we're trying to make some changes. And so I would say the fact that we were able to make changes to a few things through student council, which I was on, the high school administration was someone that listened and reacted positively. And then I spend most of my time trying to get action on climate change, so I'll have to go with that topic. And I'll pick Don Day.
Okay, I'm Don Day. I would guess probably my college advisor would have made me feel heard. And I am real concerned about climate change. And now I need to, Alice?
Alice?
Oh, I've spoken. I've
But
spoken.
how about Dee Dawkin?
Dee, have you spoken?
No, I haven't. And I just learned today that this is called popcorning with the young people on I was making calls for Amendment 2 today. But anyway, my high school biology teacher, I felt heard by him, and I'm interested in a lot of things, but habitat conservation is a big one. And I will say Terry.
This is Jack Meisenbach. Terry stepped away. I can't even remember high school, to be honest with you, but I got concerned about climate change, and I did a lot of backpacking when I was out of college. And we did this for 20 years in Wyoming and Colorado, and you could actually see the effects of things starting to deteriorate in natural areas. So, and I'm very concerned about climate change, including air and water pollution. Thank you. I don't see anybody's names on this thing. My wife has this without a gallery, so somebody.
Great. How about Rob Jacobson?
Sure thing. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you all probably don't know me because I'm deeply in arrears in my Sierra Club dues.
Me too.
I work for the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm a research hydrologist. Maria did an internship with our lab a number of years ago, and so I was interested in seeing what she has to say. Probably the most influential person in my career was a college professor who told me about the immediacy and intricacy of soil science. And the environmental issue that I care the most about is the wise application of science and decision-making. I've spent the last 25 years or so of my life working on Missouri River science and politics. And that's certainly something that I'm very interested in. Over.
Thank you, Rob. How about Lynn Malley? And are you with us? I can tell you're joining by phone, so it might be hard to jump off mute. Okay, we will forge ahead, and Lynn, if you come back, we would love to have you. So what I'd like to spend some time today talking about are lessons learned at Sprog. The reason why I asked this question about who made you feel listened to is because I think this idea of empowerment.
I'm unmuted now.
You are unmuted now. Please share. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Yeah, I can't hear you all very well. I did just unmute myself. When I think back to college days, it's probably reading Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and I also had I went to a Jesuit school. I had a mentor who was a Jesuit priest and a shaman. And most recently I have, been involved with Missouri River Relief, so clean water, and Al Gore's climate reality leadership corps. So those are things I'm very much interested in, the intersection of environmentalism and the pandemic that we're all living in now. I think they're very much related.
Great, thank you, Lynn, appreciate it. So as I mentioned, the reason why I wanted to ask who was someone that made you feel heard as a young person, because a lot of my experiences through Sprog and since then have reflected the importance of listening and of making room for youth voices, for marginalized voices to be engaged in environmental work. So today what I want to talk about are lessons learned from Sprog. I'll explain what Sprog is in just a moment. And then 2 vignettes of my experiences since leaving Sprog and since leaving Missouri that have let me apply those lessons. And lastly, some thoughts about how we can mirror ecosystems in the way that we build movements. And we'll get to that when we get there. So to start, Sprog is a week-long summer intensive program that's to develop youth leadership. Sprog stands for Summer Program, so SPROG program. And I attended this program in 2013. Youth are engaged in this from the ages of 16 to about 28 years old, and it happens across the country each year. And there's also one that happens in Puerto Rico. And so in 2013, I attended Sprog in Puerto Rico. I was 17 years old, and I was joined by 24 youth, all from Puerto Rico and myself, to learn about how to build youth leadership and environmental movements in Spanish. And a lot of our work focused on the 3 bullets that are here on the screen of how to develop teams effectively and collaborate with one another, how to successfully launch an environmental campaign. Especially in Puerto Rico, we talked about the importance of reducing single-use plastics, supporting ocean conservation, and engaging in sustainable agriculture that can support local communities. And we also talked about how to leverage power with communities, using media to reach out to more folks, figuring out who are the people to leverage at the local university where you attend, or your high school where you are, to think about where are resources and how can we combine them to more effectively work together and to achieve our goals of these different environmental issues. And I think, so these are some photos of the trainings we had. We spent time on the beach collecting trash. We talked to community members about sustainable agriculture. We had workshops where we tried on different lenses of, okay, you are an organizer. How are you going to address this challenge? And troubleshoot together. How would you address challenges that come up as you build movements, or when there are disagreements, what do you do? And a lot of the principles that I heard there focused on this idea of listening to one another, creating space, using the tools and the power and the strengths of our communities to achieve our goals. And as a big lesson, I left at 17 years old to go to Stanford University afterwards, thinking that, hey, you, young person, you have power, and your voice is needed in our movements for conservation, for climate change, for all these issues that we care about. You are important and you have a role to play. And I think this isn't a new message, and I'm sure you guys have heard it before. But what I think is important is that it requires flipping this script from saying that we need young voices to accomplish our goals to really center and say, we will and we need to create space for young voices to shape and direct our collective goals. And we can do this by honoring the gifts and the vision that youth bring to the work, alongside the experience and lessons learned from our elders. Because together, that vision, that experience, can be so much more effective for our movement building. And so the main lessons that I took from Sprog, from summer program with Sierra Club, is that we need to create space for young voices and for other marginalized voices to have a seat at the table and to contribute to this environmental work we need to do. And through Sprog and through my work since then, I've seen that youth are leading the charge and they're reimagining what environmental movements can be. And I've heard 4 key messages that I want to share with you today. And those are, first, that justice and environmental issues are inherently tied. As you've seen with Sierra Club, I've been so appreciative of what Sierra Club has done, as well as 350.org or the Sunrise Movement, to actively take stances on Black Lives Matter over the last few months and say that we oppose oppression in all of its forms, as it shows up in environmental racism, where folks, Black communities, brown communities, are downwind of the coal power plants and have higher rates of asthma because of what they're breathing. That environmental racism is on the same page and an issue, as well as police brutality and the other expressions of racism that we see, oppression that we see in our society. And so what I'm hearing through Sierra Club, through these other organizations, is this emphasis on showing and acknowledging and uplifting that connection between justice and environmental issues. Second, there is a lesson around anti-oppression and anti-racism, both in how we organize together as well as what we are organizing around. The latter of what we are organizing is kind of related to the first one of how are we centering environmental justice? Are we talking about inequities in solar panel subsidy programs that are mostly benefiting white communities, but leaving so many other communities off the list? But not just in what we're organizing around, but how we organize. So that means how we create space in meetings that we hold, how we prioritize activities, who is in the leadership teams, and who informs the strategies that are used. And so I'll talk about this later, but I participated in a youth organizing group that went to the climate conference, at the UN climate conferences in Europe. And something that was really strong and important for us was that we need people of color as our leaders, our youth that are people of color, leading this group and shaping the dialogue, because there are so many intersectional issues that, as a white woman, in my experience, my lived expertise and experience, I don't have a full picture of what it's like to experience environmental racism, or to understand the challenges that communities face with clean air or lack thereof, or clean water or lack thereof. Third, there's an emphasis on, while we need local action, we also need the systemic change. And I hear that reflected in the way that you all are talking about the candidates that are interested in running for Missouri or nationally, and the importance of political change. And that's very much mirrored in the voices and the words I heard from Sprog, and I've heard since then. Because my generation, as let's say the generation is 15 to 30, we know that shorter showers and recycling aren't enough. And when someone says, oh, what can we do? You can, take that shorter shower, or you recycle your cans. It's insufficient and leaves much to be wanted, because we know that while that's important, the root of environmental challenges requires that we work in places of power, on policy, on changing how regulation is done, because that is what the meaningful, lasting change looks like, along with these behavioral changes. A friend of mine, for example, is part of our Children's Trust lawsuit. It's also known as Youth versus Gov. They are a group of 20 youth ranging from 10 years old to 22 years old that is right now suing our national government, saying that the government's taking insufficient action on climate change, you're threatening our lives. And so finding ways that we can use law, we can use systemic change to adjust and to push forward on environmental movements. And lastly, the core message I want to share with you is the importance of art and storytelling as part of environmental solutions. I've been impressed by how creative expression is often used in youth engagement, youth spaces, as a way to build community and as a way to sustain ourselves as we work on what can be at times really overwhelming, challenging, emotionally draining issues of climate change, of environmental degradation, and the importance of using art and using storytelling to hold each other up and hold each other together. And in my own experiences, it's been very true. I am a singer and a songwriter, and it's been a source of safe harbor for me as I retreat back from very intense environmental spaces, as well as a form of action. While at the climate conference in Poland in 2018, I sang to a group of Brazilian delegates and UK delegates on a plane leaving Poland to say, this is the message of youth, that we demand action, that we believe change is possible, and we expect better of all our collective elected officials to see this change happen. And actually, now that I think about it, I'd love to share that video with you all afterwards. So maybe I'll share that with Carolyn, of the video of me singing this song as a form of action. So with these 4 core messages of youth environmental activists and how youth that I've been exposed to and that I am part of are reimagining environmental movements, I'd like to turn to share 2 vignettes about how I've seen these core messages and the lessons learned about how to listen, how to build sustaining collaborative processes, how I've seen that play out since leaving Sprog. The 2 vignettes I will talk about today are on climate justice, advocacy at Conference of the Parties, the UN Conference on Climate Change in 2018, as well as around community leadership and sustainable livelihoods in southern Mexico. And I'll get through each of those. So to start off on climate justice at the UN Climate Conference, I attended in 2018 in December with a group of 12 youth from the US. And we went there as a group of youth with Sustain Us to call for just solutions for climate change that requires us uplifting the voices of frontline communities, and also called on elected officials in our countries to be accountable for action. And that so often communities that have limited resources, that aren't represented in places of power, they don't have a space at the table. And so how can we as youth uplift those voices, uplift the solutions that are coming out of those communities, and also uplift them and say, those solutions that our elected officials are giving aren't enough. We expect more. We expect better from them. And so while at the climate conference, we organized and participated in different events to highlight the injustices we are seeing in how the conferences were being held, and to uplift the voices, the strengths, the solutions that were coming from frontline communities. And this is both in the actions we do, so we're aiming at the negotiators who are there. There are thousands of people that all come together for these conferences every single year, but also get our voices to the negotiators as well as to international media, to let everyone who's not at that conference, who's back home around the world, know that here are injustices, here is what we hope to see. So what does this look like? This can look like, and this looked like, us supporting Maori youth that had traveled all the way from New Zealand, share about Indigenous ways of knowledge and how this knowledge is so important to protect wildlife and habitats, and that we need stronger regulations on energy in order to protect those resources. Or our group of young folks, we organized and participated in events to say that the US's expanding interests in coal and in oil is counter to what we want, and that we need a clean energy future to protect our ecosystems and to uplift what true justice and liberty means to us. And to kind of explain why, okay, youth going to this meeting, why is that a big deal? It's a massive conference. You have leaders from around the world who are here to talk about climate change every year. And these conferences have been happening longer than I've been alive, and still there's little action. And when we flip the script and give voices to youth, voices to solutions, it's a way to counter and to push back on this slow slogging process that hasn't seen the results that we need. And so while this plenary is going on and these conversations are happening, there's side events. And so youth from our group were participating on panels and sharing why we must act on climate change. I shared my song and talked about my story of being from Missouri and seeing the importance of being close connection to the land, to our rivers, to our ecosystems, and that we must protect these spaces and address climate change if we want to keep them. We participated in actions, disrupting events or holding sessions outside of the events to say, the top left-hand side of your screen are Maori youth, to say you're not protecting our rights, you're not even mentioning Indigenous communities in this negotiation text, and this is wrong, and this is why, and this is how we think you should carry this forward. I'd love to maybe pause here to see if you all have any questions about the climate conference. Yes, I'd love to see if you have any thoughts or questions or ways that I can expand on this.
I have one, Maria. How, as young people, was it hard to get engaged into like some of the side events? I don't know if there were side events or breakout events. I mean, because I would think that would be kind of challenging to get with the people that are in power controlling the schedules and everything and try and get that space, as you call it.
Yeah, great question. So there are sections where complete negotiators are. You can get access into those. So I sat in a few conversations, specifically looking at the text and people going through. But these are moments where activists are not invited. It's very much sit and listen as the negotiators are at the table actually discussing the text. And so participation in that is open, though restricted. And then there's also a lot of sections and a lot of areas of the giant conference center that are for communities to share. It's for local nonprofits to host little convenings and events, as well as these panel areas. So for example, the panel that you see here was UN sanctioned, we got all the requirements to do so. And even the protests, there's a process to apply and say, hey, we're going to respond in this way. We'd like to get your approval so we don't get kicked out. And so our voices are heard. And so it is a pretty, in some cases, the democratic process. In other spaces, especially in Poland, it was cinched in a lot more than it had been at previous COPs. And so the ability to uplift those voices and to say no was somewhat more restricted than usual.
And just to follow on, did you feel that people, listened, that you were able to, get some of the people that needed to hear?
Great question. So there are two groups of people we were trying to get to listen. One, the negotiators, two, international media. On the negotiators, how the overall text went was not great. And so I don't think the voices of the youth organizers, the Indigenous organizers, was present necessarily in how the negotiations played out, because those closed rooms are the way they are, because the pressures from Saudi Arabia, the US, and Australia are so present, it's hard to push it forward. But definitely with international media and for sending the message back home to not necessarily these negotiators for federal systems, but those folks that are leading states, the governors, the cities, the mayors, communities. There was definitely a lot of energy there and a lot of spurring that happened following COP that I definitely see the cogs and everything moving because of the way the actions that are happening at the COPs.
Okay, thank you.
Great, anyone else? So what I'd like to share, oh, is there someone? No, okay. So I'd like to share a short clip. I'm hoping my audio quality is good enough. But I want to share what is in the lower left, right-hand side of the screen now, which is the sign that says, "Keep it in the ground." This was an event that our group organized as Sustain Us, the 12 youth from the US, alongside other frontline groups that came from the US. So indigenous communities, we had Chicana leaders from LA come and others from around the country. And we organized this event to disrupt a panel that the Trump administration put together to talk about the importance of coal, and clean oil in our energy future. And the reason why we held this disruption, why we organized and protested this, was because this is just, by letting it continue, by letting it go on, is signaling an acceptance and validating its power on this international platform that we have. And so we wanted to let the Trump administration, our country, the world know that this is not what the American people want, that this is not where we want to validate. We want to validate communities. We want to validate the many efforts in our country and around the world that are looking at how do we, actually address climate change and not come up with false solutions about clean coal and clean oil as these speakers were talking about. And so what we did is we stood up as the conversation began and started laughing at the panelist as he was talking about the way forward is with coal and with oil. We stood up and laughed, and a woman said, "This is funny, but this is not the way. The real way is community-oriented solutions. We need to keep it in the ground." We all stood up, the banner went to the front, and we had four people, not just youth, speakers stand up, and we held our own panel, blocking the men behind, and held our own panel to say our message to the world and international media about what is important. We had one speaker who was a Diné woman from the Navajo Nation. We had one speaker who was from Honduras. We had someone who is in the US versus Gov lawsuit, and someone from Chennai, India, who is now hearing about how her family's home is flooding more and more each year because of climate change. And so we took that space and we gave it to these panelists. And I want to share a little bit of this video, and I would like to have a little conversation with you all afterwards, if you'd be so inclined, to talk about this kind of activism and this kind of youth informed leadership that happened at COP. And so I'm going to share this short video. The sound quality is not very good, but I'm hoping that you see what happens here. And let me see.
It is clear that energy innovation and fossil fuels will continue to play a leading role. Energy access.
I would love to take a moment to chat with you all. I'm curious what that kind of action, even, excuse me, that small little snippet, how that makes you feel. Do you think a protest like that is useful? This was what youth decided, this group of youth with frontline communities said, this is the action we want, this is what we want to take. And as your question, Carolyn, kind of pointed to is that, so what's the role? What is useful? And I'm curious also for your thoughts about what role can media play, and what role can events like this that are garnered and pointed towards media play in shaping our movements. And we'd just love to open up for conversation if you all have thoughts you'd like to share. Reflections.
I think it was great. It was inspiring, and I think it made a very good impression. And interrupted lies.
Yeah, I agree. It was, well, it looked gutsy for one thing. You know, it takes guts to you know, get up in a room like that and disrupt. But I think it really made the point that, you know, they were completely on the wrong path, the completely wrong direction. And so, you know, it seems like, you know, when they're spouting that kind of wrong information, that, you know, something like that possibly is required. And I agree, a lot of times the activities that we do are not only to get the attention of perhaps the decision makers or influencers in the room, but also the point you made earlier about getting the attention of the media, and then, you know, making that broader connection to people around the world who maybe aren't at the event, but, you know, or, you know, because something like that, they might not ever pay attention to COP. But then if that makes the news that these young people are doing this kind of thing, and then they have to ask and say, well, what are they upset about? Why are they upset? You know, and so it seemed very valuable to me.
I just think it's so important to let them know that we're hearing them and they're wrong, you know, or in situations like that, that they need that this false information, these false roads that they go down, they need to be called out. And, you know, maybe nothing happens right then, but letting them know that we're watching and we are aware and conscious of what's happening, and we're standing up to say, hey, we hear you. I think that's very important.
So I have to ask though, you know, were people afraid to do that? Or, I mean, how did you get the courage, I guess, to, you know, do that kind of direct action? So
That's a great, that's interesting, because one of my reflections actually was, as we were planning it the days and the week before, it made me feel uncomfortable. I was like, is that really effective? Are we just walking into their trap of deflecting our attention to get this Trump head, and then they keep doing these other things? But that was a moment for me to reflect and say, wait a second, I'm coming at this from a place of power. I need to listen more. And so I sat down. I was just listening and letting the youth, this man here, Philip Brown, who's at the front holding the sign, and especially the people of color in my group, take the leadership on this and tell me what is the answer that you see, and what do you think is most effective here, and turning to the folks that have been coming to COPs and doing activism like this for years and years. And so I think that was a moment for my own reflection and my own of, oh, this makes sense. And then realizing that when the movement happened, when this activity happened, my place wasn't stand and hold that sign. My place was to make the sign, to be behind the curtains, and to put my time and my investment into the work, but not put myself as the face of a movement, because I see myself reflected in so many movements. I see Greta Thunberg. I see myself in her as a white woman. But how am I creating space for these other amazing leaders that are there and who are taking the work forward? And so that was a reflection I wanted to share about that experience.
Nice sign. I'm just now seeing that it is oil derricks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very nice.
Thank you. Great. So I'd love to turn to the next vignette of youth and of community leadership. And now we're going from Poland up in the icy cold down to central Mexico. It's southern Mexico in Chiapas. I lived and worked in central Mexico for a year with Conservation International, the year after graduating from Stanford. And spent this time working on watershed conservation, because I so dearly love water, as well as looking at sustainable agriculture practices in southern Mexico. And so I'd like to describe a situation to you and then get your input on what the solution might be out of this. So in this beautiful landscape of rolling rainforests, beautiful beaches, there's a challenge in that this is some of the most biodiverse regions in Mexico, but it's also being chopped down and being sold out of communities as these communities are looking for new opportunities and more opportunities to uplift their families. Because they're limited opportunities, communities are impoverished, and they need new sources of income. There's also the challenge that previous efforts to do conservation work hasn't worked, in a large part because it's, oh, here's a solution, let's drop down a national park and then close it off and walk away. But that doesn't create lasting change, because as soon as those people, the funding is gone for that organization, things go back to the way they were, which might be, you know, the slow encroachment of forest lands, as we've seen so many places around the world. And the last challenge is also that funding is limited and the presence of organizations in this area is limited. So there's not a lot of manpower to regulate, to keep things in check, as it can be in other places. But while there's a challenge, there is also opportunity. In southern Mexico, there are a lot of university students, as well as young members of the communities, that want to learn and want to advance professionally. And not only do they want to advance professionally, but these youth, as well as the communities, know the value of the land. They appreciate the value and know that it's an incredible resource for them and for their families. And also, while nonprofits don't necessarily have a lot of funding, they have a lot of knowledge about conservation, about agriculture, and about how to do things in a better way. And so I'm curious, I'll pose it back to the group because I love group activity. Given this challenge, given this opportunity, what might be a way forward that centers youth leadership and community leadership in sustaining the biodiverse forests? This can be complete shoot out ideas, complete brainstorm. There's no right answer. Just curious for your thoughts of how you would assess that challenge and opportunity.
Well, I guess I would throw out that it seems like the university students might be interested in trying to come up with alternative ways to make money from the forest intact, and you know, somehow engage them in that so that they're advancing their careers and their professions, but we're also meeting the goal of not chopping down the forest. So something along those lines.
Great. Oh, Christine, do you have something to share?
No, it would be off topic.
Okay, anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times, yes. So Carolyn, that's very much aligned with the solutions that folks came up with. An idea that you have this interest, this enthusiasm, this hunger to learn from youth. Why not pair that with a nonprofit, with, in this case, Conservation International, to help the students gain credits and a college degree, and the community members a source of income by teaching sustainable agriculture practices as well as alternative livelihoods to increase the value of what they are growing on the land that they have, so they don't need to go off and cut into the forest more or leave the community altogether and head to the city. And so while in central or southern Mexico in Chiapas, I spent time with this group of youth that are sophomores in college that every so often take a bunch of equipment and learning materials, and they head out to the forests to talk to the communities that live there. Some of the students are from these communities themselves, and they go back home, they go back to these communities, and they talk and they learn together about alternative livelihoods. And so one of the ways this showed up is youth, the young people leading different activities about how do you make jams with the fruit that's on your land, And how would you market those if you want to take them to the farmer's market or to the ecotourism spot that the community is already using? And so there were conversations where people would take the poster board and outline, okay, to make the jam safely, here's the requirement for hygiene, here's how much sugar you use, in tactile ways for community members that don't necessarily read, for how do we make sense of this information and then use it to increase the products, the value of the products that we make. And so folks made maracuya jam, which is passion fruit jam, as well as candies with the miel, with the honey that they grow on their farms. And you know, some other ones I can't think of, but bringing jams, bringing candies, and figuring out, okay, now that we have this, how do we market it in really appealing ways that folks will want to buy? So there were different sessions teaching about that. Along with the sessions on how to make these goods, there were conversations about how do we do shade-grown coffee? How do we see this as a resource so we don't have to cut down the forest? We can just plant coffee where we are. And so there were training exercises with youth as well as with adults and farming leading community members to talk about, okay, if I'm a tree over here, where would you want to make sure your coffee plant is growing so it can build on the symbiotic relationship between this, this kind of tree and that kind of tree, and how you plant based on the shade the next coffee tree. So having these interactive workshops to think through how do we do this better. And I was extremely impressed by the youth of these communities and the university students that were supportive in it, because they have a vision that they want to advance professionally. They want to help their communities. They have ideas for how to use ecotourism, use the media to forward these environmental campaigns, while also making sure that communities can be sustained. And similarly to my earlier point of, it's not just youth organizing, but it's saying youth that have the vision and elders who have the experience working with the land or understanding how these processes work. How can we bring you together meaningfully to make this a sustainable project and to reap the benefits of sustainability together? So with that, coming to the close of our time together, what I want to reflect in what I'm thinking about as I've reflected on these opportunities that I've gotten to be a youth engaged in these issues or witness youth in southern Mexico take action on sustainable conservation, is this importance of creating movements that are like an ecosystem community. And by that, I mean, how are we thinking about the ways that our movements on environmental efforts or our campaigns are diverse, are symbiotic, are sustainable, and are complex? And what this might look like is, by diverse, how are we bringing in youth voices, indigenous voices and leadership, communities of color, into the decision-making that's happening and into how we're deciding what is important? By symbiotic, I mean, how are we supporting each other? That no one has the answer, but together, in the ecosystem of strengths that we all have, we can build stronger movements and build on those strengths by listening and by learning from one another. And then thirdly, sustainable. How are we creating room for joy, enjoyment, and storytelling and care? Because to do this work and to keep doing it and not burn out, we need space to be sustainable and to see the humanity in one another and in what we're hoping to achieve and why. And last, complexity is thinking about how do we invite discomfort, taking time as well as listening to go slow and go together. So I think for me, a moment of complexity was sitting in that room as youth organizers were saying, we need to do this action. And it made me feel uncomfortable saying, okay, this issue is much more complex than yes, do it, and no, don't. It's this whole gamut of different experience that folks are bringing and ideas of what makes sense to do. So with that, last questions I would love to leave you with is thinking about how in your own work, whatever that might be, can you listen more? Can you be that person to someone else so when they are in a call 20 years from now, they can say, oh, I remember this person who listened to me, and that made me feel heard. And also, what is the story of community and that ecosystem that you hope to achieve in the work you do as a personal reflection? It's been lovely to speak with you, and I'd welcome any questions or love to talk more about any of these experiences online or offline as it's helpful or interesting. Thank you.
Maria, if I could ask a couple questions. I don't want to, I know you can't speak for all youth. I don't want to be, make that mistake. But we have actually been trying to, make stronger connections with young people and minority community members. And we've had, some young people fill out our volunteer survey in response, like to our email newsletter and things. We have this survey on our website, and I try and reach out and engage them. And maybe the problem is I just reach out through email because I'm sort of an introvert. But we're not having much luck actually getting people to join in with this. And I've kind of observed, it seems like that young people want to work with young people. It's a big hurdle to overcome, to get like your first one or two young people to, to step into the fold. We do have a few now, that a couple of young ladies that are working with us on helping with social media. But so I just wondered if you had any advice to how to make that space and so that they feel comfortable engaging with us. So, because so often I've observed young people go and create their own organizations when I really feel we'd all be more effective if we work together. Because, we have wisdom, experience, and money. And, they have enthusiasm and ideas. So, so thoughts, any advice?
It's very interesting, Carolyn, because both of the programs I worked with that I mentioned here are very much youth driven. And so what I'll draw on is actually my work in consulting with foundations, because right now a lot of the questions foundations are asking are, how do we bring youth voice and student voice into how education research is done? And so what I've seen there is this issue of recruitment, of how do you get people to join you, and then inclusivity of how do you get them to sustain and feel included in the decision making. And for recruitment, one thing that's kept popping up in this education research inclusivity has been the importance of going to already organized groups and finding, because one or two people at youth, I imagine it's intimidating to walk into a room of people they don't know, especially if they're a lot older. But thinking of, are there groups that you could latch on and you could sit in a meeting of the Hickman Biology Club or the MU Environmental Sustainability Group, to sit in and to listen to what their priorities are, and then afterwards reflect back and say, hey, I think that here may be some opportunities of overlap, or and I think the mention that you just made of, we have resources, we have power, we have money, thinking about creating opportunities for partnership with groups and with efforts that are already demonstrated or presented, and with that idea of partnership is creating openness for dialogue, creating openness for shared benefit, and for making sure that everyone is benefiting from this relationship. So if they engage in this, what does that mean for their movement? If they engage in this, how open are you to shaping your strategy and your approach based on what they say is worth your time, based on what they say is important? And so there's been a lot of talk about go to groups that are already made, be humble, look for authentic partnership in this conversation. So there's big takeaways. I know that's not specific enough to support, but I love that question. I'd love to keep thinking about it.
Yeah, that's good. Because one thing I was thinking based, on what you were saying this evening, I wasn't sure if just with the ones that have raised their hand that they want to work with us, I was thinking maybe I could just host a listening session just with young people, not invite the world, just invite these 5 or 6 people that have raised their hand and said they're interested in working with us. So maybe it would minimize the intimidation factor of, that they might feel, because we've actually invited some of the young people to actually come to the executive committee and be, maybe potentially members, but it's difficult because they see that as too big of a step. So it's kind of, I've got to find some or we have to find some interim steps to take.
I love that idea of listening sessions. I think that's really powerful, as well as showing them. Sierra Club is one of the most progressive, youthful spaces that I know of in environmental movement, alongside 350 and Sunrise Movement. And so something I'm thinking about is connecting with local group, as well as signaling the other connections that are present across the Sierra Club.
Right. Yeah, we have made some effort to connect with the Sunrise Movement here locally, as well as the groups on campus that are working on climate action. So, and lately, to the extent that we can, we've been, because we're limited by our COVID rules right now, but we've been participating in some of the Black Lives Matter protests. So, all right, well, let me open it up. Anybody else have questions or comments?
Well, I'm starting to maybe, Lynn Malley, I don't know if she's still on the line, but she was haranguing us about getting more involved with the river relief and other organizations. And I think this is what she was, it's kind of dawning on me that this is what she was, I think, pointing towards, is that we need to go out and listen. And it's, yeah, but I have a problem with how to make it reality, how to act with our particular group here in Columbia, what it means and how it actually is going to happen, and how it is going to affect us, and how it is going to change us. Having voices from youth voices and other groups that are underrepresented. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I still find it very confusing.
Because I think the challenge is to find that overlap, as Maria mentioned, so that, we're still working on our mission, or the mission that we view as our local mission, but that, we're finding overlap and partnership with what they want, what they want to accomplish. So,
I'd love to having that conversation, as I can be useful. Sorry, Terry, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to mention that Don Day helped us work with a science group at Hickman High School that I thought really was good, and I really think it'd be good to try to do that at the other high schools too. We had, 2 or 3 meetings with them anyway, before COVID. And then I actually did hook up with the Mizzou Climate Action Coalition, they were called at the time, and they were all about the divestiture of fossil fuels, what they were working on, and I tried to help them with that based on my knowledge of investment finance and how all that, the stock market works. So, but I think you're right on. That's a good suggestion, is to just go to their groups and just listen and see what we can do to help them. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Jack was talking about there, Don was instrumental in helping get these, what we called Columbia, Missouri climate conversations going with the high school students. And we did have, in the last one, we did have some students from the other high schools come to the meeting. The challenge was, and certainly open to ideas, but there was a lot of community activists such as myself and Jack and Don and others who participated, but we couldn't get the young people, they didn't want to step up into like leading. They came, the first meeting, we had like a large number of young people, high school students attend. Next meeting, smaller number, next meeting, smaller number. And so somehow, I recognized we weren't fulfilling their needs or their interest. And everybody was desperate, to understand what is it, that you want to do, and that, to put their voices first, and, let them lead. But I don't know, we didn't find the magic sauce to make that happen. And so
What I appreciate in that is it's saying that you can go to someone, ask what they want, but if there's no bucket, nothing to grasp onto, it's hard to build on something. So you can
Right.
say, oh, jog a memory of like, oh yeah, I do care about this issue as it's connected to what you just shared. And so there's the building point. Two things that come to mind are the Sunrise Movement has done this really incredible job to do trainings and lessons, quick. I think one was 2 hours one week, 2 hours the next week, or an hour each, of what is climate policy. And anyone could call in. I think there were 60 people on the call. And that's the first step. And once you have that knowledge, they give you little actions to do of saying, hey, now that you have this knowledge, it's your responsibility to use it. And it's open not just to youth, it's open to anyone. So I really like that model of, to get your foot in the door, it's giving them ownership of knowledge and empowering them to have tools and knowledge that they can then use in these different ways. And I forgot the second point, but I'll leave it there.
Okay, well, that's good, because we do hope once, we're able to, because school, ended and everybody went virtual and we didn't have any more meetings. And I did speak with one of the science club coordinators the other day, and he said that that right now, of course, he's busy trying to change all his lessons plans to teach online. But he said he does hope to, get everything going again sometime in the fall. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to try again, and certainly, can use the insights that that we've gotten tonight to try and help us connect in a new and more sustainable way. So, and I noticed that you're on your slides about the sustainable too, the fun and the storytelling. I went to one Sierra Club training where they had they had different people talk, and one group, they like chapter, I think, had actually designated, like a person in charge of fun. And I thought, that's something that we might need to do locally, because it's definitely not in my normal comfort zone. And so that seems like something that, you have to sometimes like make it a priority to think about the fun and not just the work and what you want to accomplish. So
Really.
We do count on Christine to help us a lot with the art part.
Definitely. I have to run to a next engagement, but it's been so wonderful speaking with you all. And we'll make sure my contact information is sent out in case it's helpful.
Yes. Oh, and thank you so much, Maria. Just speaking on behalf of everyone, this has been really enlightening, and your work so far has been very impressive, and I'm glad Sierra Club could have played a small role in helping you on your path. So
an important one. It was my first time speaking Spanish, and then 3 or 4 years later, I moved to Mexico speaking only Spanish and worked there for a year. So that was the jump, and I really, really appreciated that.
It's great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everyone, I just want to say good night, and we'll have another meeting probably in about another 6 weeks. So thank you for joining.
I said, you're many of my favorite people.